This podcast is brought to you by North Carolina's electric cooperatives.
This is NC Spin, an unrehearsed discussion on issues of interest to North Carolinians. Now, here is your moderator, Tom Campbell.
Welcome. You've heard and read the spin the media and the politicians have put on the issues of the day. To get the correct spin on what's going on in North Carolina, let's introduce you to our panel of experts. They include, in case you do not recognize him, the slimmer, more modern version of our favorite journalist, Cash Michaels.
Thank you.
Director of NC Policy Watch, Chris Fitzsimon. Syndicated columnist and author, John Hood. And Becki Gray, Vice President of the John Locke Foundation. On episode number 988, we've got a lot to talk about this week. We begin by discussing the Supreme Court's consideration of a Wisconsin redistricting case that could impact our state. We'll talk about UNC President Margaret Spellings telling the Board of Governors to let her do her job. And we'll ask why the legislature is stonewalling Governor Cooper's nominees to the State Board of Education. Of course, as always, we're also going to ask the panel to tell us something we don't know. Let's get to it. 2017 is 9 months old, and at this point, the top story of the year in our state has to be redistricting. This past Tuesday, the U.S. Supreme Court heard arguments about a redistricting case in Wisconsin that could have impact here in our state. Even as it's being considered, our legislature is debating judicial redistricting. But the North Carolina Courts Commission asked the legislature to table the issue until the short session next spring. One of the judges asked what we think is the relevant question, why the hurry, she asked. Cash Michaels, why indeed? Are lawmakers in a rush because they think the U.S. court decision could somehow change what they're considering?
That's a possibility, but let's face it, the judiciary in this state is the last frontier as far as Republican influence is concerned. We've seen them try to mess with the state Supreme Court. They backed off of that, but they certainly rearranged things with the Court of Appeals. Now, the argument for judicial redistricting is wanting to get more Republican judges elected. And I guess they have the math down that by the time this all gets to court, somebody sues and everything, they'll at least elect a few Republican judges.
Becki, I was going to ask you, what is the driving force behind this thing? Well, is that it, trying to elect more Republican judges?
It certainly could be, and those have been the accusations. Of course, it seems like everything that happens at the General Assembly, it's because of one political party or another. I mean, we seem to hear that about everything. But, you know, when you look at these judicial districts and the map of the entire state, this has not been addressed entirely for decades. So I think that there is wide agreement that this is something that we need to look at. We need to reevaluate. We need to ensure that there is access to justice for all citizens across North Carolina and that those resources are distributed in an equitable way.
Chris, by statute, the Courts Commission has the authority to recommend the reorganizations of these districts. But last week they met to consider House Bill 717 and recommended waiting to the spring. They've got the oversight, but is their recommendation necessarily got to be followed by the legislature?
No, it doesn't. I think, I don't disagree with Becki on part of what she said. I think these districts do need a good fresh look. They don't need to be redistricted in a couple of months, floated at the end of the legislative session, then met in some crazy special sessions every month to talk about them. And Senate President Pro Tem Phil Berger's chief of staff is the one who said the goal is to elect more Republicans. That's not hearsay. He actually said that. Which is not the way you go into a plan to try to keep the court system fair. Look, if we're going to do this, we should have a year long or 6 months long. The court commission should be involved. We should have hearings. We should come up with maps that everybody agrees serve justice. Give you an example, Buncombe County, arguably one of the more liberal counties in North Carolina under this plan, would have a majority of Republican judges representing it. It's clear the goal here isn't to fix districts that need to be fixed, it's to elect more Republicans.
Or to create necessarily better judicial system. Right. John, let me shift over to this redistricting case with the U.S. Supreme Court, because I find that very interesting, and I don't know whether you followed the arguments with the justices last Tuesday, but we heard those oral arguments. How about framing this case for us? What really are the issues in this Wisconsin case?
All of the issues involve Anthony Kennedy, as far as I can tell.
Well, that's on the decision side.
All of the issues and all the arguments are aimed at Anthony Kennedy. That is the entire, this is like a single judge presiding over a case, and the other justices have already basically staked themselves out.
Because we assume it's going to be a 4-4 split.
You can tell even by the way they commented about it, that is the most likely scenario. The Chief Justice, John Roberts, illustrating that even if you could make some arguments about the Supreme Court intervening, that it would be perceived as a sort of Bush v. Gore, argued forever as a partisan decision, kind of a problem. On the other side, you have the more liberal justices, I think, correctly observing that when you have out of the control gerrymandering, it has implications for people's right to be represented by the people that they vote for. And so you've got a block of 4 who say, we don't like gerrymandering, but we're not sure there's a judicial remedy. We've got a block of 4 who say there has to be a judicial remedy. And we have Anthony Kennedy, who previously said there is no judicial remedy that he could see.
But he felt like it ought to be addressed.
What they're trying to do is give him, and everybody knows he's not going to be on the court for much longer, so they're trying to give him something he can accept as a standard. I'm not sure they got there, but it is all about Anthony Kennedy.
Yeah, our understanding, Chris, because John didn't totally answer my question, I do agree with him that the outcome depends on Justice Kennedy. But this one, unlike so many of the redistricting cases, doesn't really focus primarily on racial gerrymandering as much as it does political gerrymandering.
Right, and I think there's a few things at play here. I don't disagree that Kennedy is a swing vote, although there were interesting, I don't think Alito is going to vote with a liberal wing, but he did ask some interesting questions during the arguments, I thought. Judge Sotomayor, I thought, asked one of the most compelling questions about how does this serve democracy to have extreme partisan gerrymandering in effect? Doesn't this hurt democracy? Which I think the answer is yes, it does. The question is, what do we do about it? I think one of 3 things is going to happen. One is they're going to just defeat this outright. They're going to say, we're not going to deal with this. It's not a judicial matter. The other one is they're going to set really specific standards about what extreme judicial gerrymandering is, and the states will have to follow it. What I fear, and I've said this before, is what they sort of have done with how we deal with race, which is extreme gerrymandering is bad and it's unconstitutional, but we're not going to tell you exactly what extreme gerrymandering is, and so we'll have all these cases going before courts applying a standard that might be shifting. I think we need to find out. I think it should be unconstitutional. I do think it deprives people of their franchise.
Isn't that really the problem that we've got here? The court has refused to make a decision. The Congress won't make any decision. The states are left basically on their own to try to figure out what they can and can't do and will and won't do. Why won't the court come out clearly, as John was alluding, and just say, here are the benchmarks, here are the guidelines?
Well, keep in mind, we have a Supreme Court that is still feeling burnt from Bush v. Gore. They do not want to wade into what are clearly political waters. This is clearly political, is partisan, and they want no part of it.
Well, Becki, we've still got, here in North Carolina, we've still got court cases going on so far as congressional redistricting.
5 of them. 5 cases.
Yeah, and the August redistricting of the legislature. How could this Supreme Court verdict potentially impact those court cases?
Well, of the 5 cases that are currently going in North Carolina, 2 of them are the partisan gerrymandering is the question with those. So this Wisconsin case could very much determine how those go, how those are decided.
Any indication, John, as to when we might be getting some final verdicts on some of these cases?
I fear that Chris is right, which, by the way, I don't usually fear that because I know it's impossible. But in this case, I fear that he may be right in the sense that the Supreme Court may, as they've done with the race-based gerrymandering cases, issue a ruling but not really settle anything, and this could go on forever. I think that is the worst possible outcome.
Just kick the ball down the field a little bit further.
Well, no, to muddy up the waters. It's an obscenity standard. We think that partisan gerrymandering is an obscenity, but we're not going to define it. We're going to see it. Say we're going to see obscenity on a case-by-case basis. That is a recipe, in my view, for a serious deterioration of the public.
I don't know how to define pornography, but I know it when I see it.
I didn't say it. That's all I want to say.
Another way to look at it is to get off of this. One way to look at it is the Goldilocks standard. You know, is it too much, too little? What's exactly right? And that's what the states are left with. You know, as this goes, they're not told what is the right measure. Just try it and we'll let you know. And so it's just lawsuit after lawsuit after lawsuit. Yeah.
We want to remind you of the annual Super Kids fundraising event sponsored by our friend and panelist Rufus Edmiston. This once-a-year event raises money for students badly in need of help to further their education, and through the years it has helped many going to college. This year's event's going to be Thursday, October 26th from 6 to 9 p.m. at the Farmers Market Restaurant in Raleigh. Your $60 admission includes an incredible buffet of food and drinks. To learn more or contribute, contact phone number 919-829-1988 or email Rufus@rufusedmiston.com. Many of your NC Spin friends and panelists are going to be there, as we are every year. So we want to see you there Thursday, October 26th. Again, the number 829-1988 or rufus@rufusedmiston.com. When we come back, we've got spellings in the spotlight.
NC Spin will return after these messages.
Agriculture is the backbone of our state's economy. It's the heartbeat of our rural communities. Its strength means bustling sidewalks and open signs in store windows. And with smart investments in our future, like the Plant Sciences Initiative and modern updated research stations, agriculture will remain the cornerstone of our economy. Because when agriculture is strong, our economy is strong.
With today's tools, all the information you need is just a click away.
I'm going to show you how to remove the...
And as a member of an electric cooperative, you have access to lots of valuable tools. Tools that help you do it yourself when it comes to controlling your home energy use and budget, leaving you free to be Dad. Discover how your electric cooperative can help you control your energy use at empowermenc.com.
We now return to NC Spin.
UNC System President Margaret Spellings has frequently been in the news lately. When she was Secretary of Education under President Bush, she formed what was later known as the Spellings Commission to diagnose weaknesses and potential threats to higher education. And among the findings were access and the cost of higher education in a changing workforce and global marketplace. More than 11 years later, Spellings told a gathering recently of this commission, "We've sold college as the golden ticket to middle-class opportunity, then priced average families out of the market." She noted that tuition costs for in-state students in North Carolina average close to $7,000, with non-residents paying more than twice that amount, and added that most North Carolina families can't afford to pay for even 1 year out of pocket, and nationwide college debt is now more than $1 trillion. Becki Spellings sounded a bit frustrated and maybe a bit peeved in an interview she did recently with WRAL in response to recent attempts by the UNC Board of Governors to inject themselves into running of the system. She said, "Let me manage the enterprise, let them set policy," further saying the BOG should defer to her and the chancellors of our universities. Is she right? And will the BOG heed her message?
Well, whether the BOG heeds her message, I don't know. But I think the important thing to do here, and I did this afternoon, I looked at the general statutes to check what is the role of the Board of Governors. And they do have, under North Carolina statute, determination, control, management, supervision of the university system. Now, they have hired Margaret Spellings to run this. This is a $10 billion operation when you put the UNC medical stuff into the university system, which is where it is. This is a big operation. It's kind of a separation of powers question that we're seeing in other parts of government, whether it's the State Board of Education and DPI.
That may be the second big story of 2017.
Right, but I think, when there are questions like this, you have to go to the black letter of the law to see whose job is. And I think it's clear that the Board of Governors they go way beyond, their authority goes way beyond just setting policy.
But it also has to involve tradition. And through the years, since we've had that 32-member originally Board of Governors under President Bill Friday, they pretty much set policy and let the administration run the university. Are they injecting themselves too much in operations cash?
Well, they've been accused of that, and when you have these 15 new board members led by Tom Fetzer, the former Mayor of Raleigh. Yeah, thank you. He definitely believes in injecting himself, and if he doesn't like what he sees, he's going to lead a crowd to get things changed. That's what she's up against right now.
John, previous boards have authorized, the last board authorized President Spellings to have some flexibility in centralizing, reorganizing, and perhaps maybe even decentralizing functions within the system to make it more user-friendly for students. Is there any indication of how that possible reorganization is going?
I don't think that this I don't think it's fully realized, and I think something like that will take a number of years to play out and see how it works. The university system has been in its current form for a long time. There's a lot of tradition built into it. There are people who aren't new that have been around in either administrative roles or at the university roles for a very long time. They're going to naturally resist change. This happened under Erskine Bowles, it happened under Tom Ross, happened under Margaret Spellings. This isn't necessarily a partisan matter or an ideological matter, but when you overlay the fact that the Board of Governors is mostly Republicans in an institution that is used to being run by Democrats, there is going to be some additional resistance. Now, to a point, I can take their argument. When you hire somebody to run an organization of this size, you do have to give them the authority to do so. But when it comes right down to it, the institutions, the employees of the institutions are not in charge of them. They can't be in charge of them when they are public institutions that are responsive ultimately as any other government agency to elected officials.
I want you, Chris, to comment on the statement that President Spellings made, because I found it fascinating that here we are saying that higher education is the ticket to middle-class mobility, and then we price people out of the market. And this is especially true with minorities, is it not?
It is, and I think we've made some progress in keeping tuition low and putting a freeze on tuition, but let's be honest about what's going on here. The General Assembly, especially the State Senate, did not want Margaret Spellings to be the president of the university system. They had another candidate. The Board of Governors rejected that candidate, picked Margaret Spellings, who, by the way, remember, is a Republican, worked in the Bush administration as Secretary of Education. Then, what they did, they weren't happy that the people that they elected weren't tough enough on Margaret Spellings, so they elected a new round of folks that Cash has mentioned, including Tom Fetzer, which I think is really important to think about this for our viewers. Tom Fetzer is one of the biggest lobbyists at the General Assembly. He has 20 or 30 high-profile clients. He's got to do what the legislature says because his livelihood depends on making sure that he has access and keeps the state Senate happy. It's a very complicated situation. It's driven by partisanship, I think, and ideology, even though Margaret Spellings has hired a lot of prominent Republicans from the McCrory administration.
I think everybody got on that bandwagon after the Republicans.
Chris, make up your mind. Is it ideology? I mean,
it's both.
Or is it Tom not doing what he believes?
It's
I
both.
think it's odd.
It's the state Senate's ideology.
I think you've chosen the wrong example because Tom Fetzer is going to do pretty much exactly what Tom Fetzer wants to do.
No, he won't, because he's representing Blue Cross. He needs the state Senate leadership.
You really think that what he's doing right now is not what he believes?
No, I think
he's just doing it to curry favor with the
I think it's a conflict of
legislature?
interest to have a registered lobbyist on the Board of Governors. I always have. Number one. Number two, I think the partisanship. The state Senate did not want Margaret Spellings. The people who were on the search committee who chose her were not reelected in the state Senate.
But it was a majority Republican board.
It's not just Republicans. It's a battle inside the Republican Party.
George Bush.
That's the point.
All I'm saying is I just think you chose a not very good example because Tom Fetzer has very strong opinions that have way pre-existed being a lobbyist or being on this board, and everything he's saying now is entirely consistent with his views from 20 years ago.
I'm saying that I don't believe Tom Fetzer is doing this on his own. I think he's doing what the state Senate leadership wants him to do. Now, he may agree with it, but he's also relying on powerful legislative people to make his livelihood.
Still think you got to make a choice.
I just got to say that those of us that know Tom Fetzer nobody's pulling his strings.
Well, we shouldn't have a lobbyist on the board running the Board of Governors.
Well, we've got a board full of them.
Yeah,
no, we don't. We only have a handful.
There's one point you're not factoring in. Tom Fetzer has 5 children. He's got to pay for them. He's got to make money.
He's going on that tuition.
We're going to call time out on this discussion, and when we come back after the break, we're going to talk about legislators stonewalling Governor Cooper's nominees.
NC Spin will return after these messages.
For more than 45 years, the North Carolina Retired Governmental Employees Association has advocated for local and state government retirees. Whether protecting retiree benefits or fighting for cost of living adjustments, more than 70,000 members count on us to be their voice. Government retirees work for us, and we stand for them. Learn more at ncrgea.com.
I help educate and inspire visually impaired students to strive for a brighter future.
I make sure visitors to the North Carolina Zoo take a walk on the wild side.
And I make sure that the fuel you buy is a quality product from pipeline to pump.
I support small businesses in North Carolina by matching them with hard-working, well-trained employees.
I make sure the roads you drive on are safe.
Scenic, the one voice speaking in support of the men and women who are making North Carolina great.
You sleep on concrete till your body get immune to concrete.
My mom got my brother and I up and said, come on, we're leaving.
I became homeless in the beginning of this year.
When I was about 4 or 5 years old, our house caught fire.
I used to see my brother. If he see me, he'd turn and go the other direction.
We did the only thing that we could think of, and we went to a Salvation Army shelter.
You know, we don't have this, like, what's your background look like? We just say, what do you need?
I remember the man from the Salvation Army coming down with a box of clothes.
The Salvation Army officer bought my brother and I an ice cream cone.
Last week, my brother walked up to me, and he just started a conversation.
Today I've given my life to the Salvation Army because I remember what somebody did for me, my brother, and my mom over 30 years ago.
The Salvation Army for me means hope.
Compassion.
Family.
Support.
We now return to NC Spin.
It's not been a disguise that the General Assembly wasn't happy when Roy Cooper was elected governor. In a special session last December, the lawmakers passed a law to minimize the governor's role and power over the State Board of Education, especially since Cooper had 3 appointments he could make this year. Governor Cooper made the 3 appointments, but they've yet to be confirmed by the legislature, and no action has been taken on them. Why not?
I would blame the U.S. Postal Service. Sometimes things just get lost in the mail sometimes, Tom. You know, you just can't help it.
The Supreme Court is a more legitimate excuse. Go ahead.
We've actually seen in the past, even when former Governor McCrory made appointments, there was some dragging of the feet as far as legislative confirmation. I think that the Republicans in the General Assembly see the still Republican majority State Board of Education as you know, a positive force that tends to agree with them most of the time. They're not always, and so I think there's a natural to and fro here. But we have a Constitution, and it lays out the various responsibilities.
But Chris, they're fighting. The Republican legislature is fighting with their own Republican-controlled State Board of Education. How's this impacting education?
Well, they don't. I don't think it's helping. They don't like some of the actions the board has taken with former State Republican Party Chair Bill Cobey at the head of it. But look, this goes all the way back to 2011 when Governor Perdue was in her last 2 years of her term. They refused to make her appointment, which is the first time I can recall delaying appointments for almost 2 years because they thought Governor Perdue might not be in office. Then McCrory came in, they made him wait more than a year. Now they're making Governor Cooper, they don't want the state board to have more Democrats on it. I actually think it's outrageous. It's sort of bullying and vengeful politics, and we need to be above that.
Becki, you talked about this separation of powers issue that has played out in several different arenas. Isn't this one of them?
Well, it is, and also don't forget there's still the controversy between the powers and the responsibilities of the State Board of Education and the Superintendent of Public Instruction. And I don't know that maybe part of this waiting is waiting to see how that's going to settle out and who's going to do what and what that board is going to look like, and not just as far as who sits on it, but what their responsibilities are. And don't forget too, the Constitution says that the governor can make those appointments, but there's no time frame with it. So, I mean, nobody's acting outside of the Constitution.
They can just refuse to do it for 4 years.
Cash, you see anything changing this anytime soon?
Death.
You know, that's the second shortest answer we've ever gotten, but you might need to elaborate just a little bit.
I'm being serious. It's so silly. You know, it's such a silly power struggle, and the citizens, quite frankly, are tired of it. You know, follow the Constitution. That's what people want.
Well, the other thing about it is, too, the General Assembly, they have to be here in order to make these confirmations.
They're here all the time.
But, you know, they adjourned in...
Have they ever left?
Well, that's a good question. Yeah, again, Cash, you know, death.
You know, well, they
need to be thinking about Christmas presents for each other.
They've been here a lot of days, in all seriousness. They've been here a lot of days since Governor Cooper made these appointments. If they don't like the appointments, defeat them. But this thing not even taking them up is ridiculous.
We may have to wait until April.
April, all right. Well, we'll hold you to that.
Okay.
After the break, we're going to ask the panel to tell us something we don't know.
NC Spin is brought to you in part by the North Carolina Farm Bureau. The Farm Bureau and Agriculture. We keep North Carolina growing.
The healthcare landscape is filled with questions and uncertainties of changes that are coming. In these times of change, there's one thing you can trust. You can trust your family physician to work for you, not only in treating sickness and disease, but also your overall health. Regardless of how healthcare might change, the men and women of the North Carolina Academy of Family Physicians pledge to work upholding your trust. Family physicians, your trusted healthcare advisors.
I help educate and inspire visually impaired students to strive for a brighter future.
I make sure visitors to the North Carolina Zoo take a walk on the wild side.
And I make sure that the fuel you buy is a quality product from pipeline to pump.
I support small businesses in North Carolina by matching them with hard-working, well-trained employees.
I make sure the roads you drive on are safe.
Scenic, the one voice speaking in support of the men and women who are making North Carolina great.
We now return to NC Spin.
Okay, now we come to what everybody says is their favorite part of the show when we ask the panel to tell us something we don't know. Becki Gray, I'll start with you.
Okay, North Carolina has a lot of rules, a lot of restrictions, over 10,000 restrictions in North Carolina, according to a new report by the Mercatus Center. If you were to read those restrictions 40 hours a week, it would take you 12 weeks just to read through all of them. North Carolina has the 8th most restrictions in the country, and the three areas that are most restricted are utilities, telecommunications, and healthcare services. A lot of rules.
Yeah, interesting. John Hood, tell us something we don't know.
Last year, the median household income in North Carolina rose by 4.5% after adjusting for inflation. That was far faster than the national average. It was the 4th fastest growth rate in the country. It was very impressive performance for North Carolina's economy last year.
You wrote about this in a column this week. To what do you attribute that increase?
It's just it makes the household income trends start to come more in line with some of the other trends that have shown better than average growth in North Carolina versus the rest of the
And
Southeast.
previously we were behind. Chris Fitzsimon, tell us something we don't know.
I thought one of the most startling comments from our legislative leaders recently was complaining that the Department of Environmental Quality wasn't doing its job and didn't protect our water resources in light of the discovery of the chemical Gen X in the Cape Fear River. They didn't mention that the budget cuts since the Republicans took over have forced the Department of Environmental Quality to let go 70 or lose 70 positions in the Water Quality Division, and they still refuse Governor Cooper's meager $2.6 million request to restore this. So it's fascinating to me that for a long time Republicans have hated the Department of Environmental Quality, cut its budget every year, including this past year in the budget, and now we're complaining that it's not adequately doing its job.
And now they want to form a study commission over Gen X, meanwhile the water's polluted.
Right.
All right. Cash Michaels, tell us something we don't know.
Last week, the North Carolina NAACP had their 74th annual convention in Raleigh. President Bishop William Barber stepped down. However, he's not gone. He has been elected to be a permanent member of the executive committee and president emeritus of the state conference of the NAACP. So he will be a permanent member no matter what he does or where he goes.
I'm still struggling calling him Bishop instead of President. How about you?
Hey, everybody gets promotion.
So now we get President Bishop. Is that his formal title then?
Well, President Emeritus.
And Bishop.
Yeah.
All right. Well, you've heard our spin on the issues of the day. To stay informed all during the week, give your feedback, and read my weekly column, visit our website, ncspin.com, or catch NC Spin on Facebook. Join us next week when we're going to talk about the last and latest of the special sessions and have more balanced debate for the Old North State. Until then, stay informed and watch out for the spin.
Join us next week and get the spin on issues facing our state.